Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi, this being a show where it's about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of American Gods. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with the whole Shadow situation. Obviously, it took a little while, it took literally him getting drugged and knocked out by Tyr for Shadow to realize, damn it, this is why we're not really going to Wednesday. You set this whole thing up and figures out, oh, you're the one that killed all his followers. It was interesting to find out what their back history is. Finding out the reason why Tyr holds so much resentment towards... why Tyr holds so much resentment towards Wednesday. And I think he says later on it has nothing to do with Demeter. I'm sure that was just one more thing that it would just piss him off about. Wednesday, but for him it's like, before Odin was the head of all the gods in the North, like when it came to the Norse gods, I used to be top dog until Odin, who after Loki gave birth to Fenrir was too wild, too destructive, so we had to chain him up. But Odin, being, as he says, the con man that he is, he challenged Fenrir to break free from its chain to prove its power. But Odin would have had to put his hand in Fenrir's mouth, but Tyr ended up being the one who did it, just because I think for him it's like, oh, I'm in charge, like I believe so much in this, so I'm willing to make the sacrifice. It's like, but for him it's like, and now what did Odin do? He used it to mock me and belittle me, so now like all my accomplishments meant nothing. Which is also interesting because that's when he lost his hand. We've seen moments of them together after he lost his hand, and I think it's just, like I said, one thing after another. That was the catalyst, but there's just been thing after thing. Like I said, I think the Demeter situation was just one more strike against him. Because that means he's been holding this for years. Because once again, when we saw him and a younger Wednesday, like a couple episodes back, that was like the 1700s. That was hundreds of years ago, and he's been holding on to this probably definitely longer than that, because he was already missing his hand by then. So it's like, man, you wait till now to strike. It's so interesting. So for him, this is all about making Wednesday pay, because, and especially when Wednesday finally shows up and everything and kind of calls him out. It's like, oh, Tyr promises that if I hand myself over here, let you go. It's like, do you believe him? It's like, yeah, that's always Tyr's greatest weakness. My greatest strength, weakness. It's like, yeah, you deceived me. But, he's like, honestly, you did surprise me. He's like, yeah, because you underestimated me. And he's like, you are right. But it is interesting that, it's kind of what I thought. Like, granted, it's not as petty as I thought. But still, it's like, man, you've been holding this grudge for centuries. And, potentially longer, and that's why I just think it's interesting that you decided to strike now. I guess because prior to now he's never had the upper hand against Wednesday. I guess he finally found leverage that he could use against Wednesday, because it's like, well, his other kids were gods, so it's, especially like Donar, so there was no getting him on that front. But Shadow hasn't really come into his power, so he feels like Shadow's kind of a loose end. He's kind of more human than anything right now, so he's an easier, I don't know. Maybe Wednesday, like I said, I think Wednesday coming back into his life in this whole Demeter thing, I think it was already a straw too far last time. Like I said, because I'm trying to remember whether or not, if do clarify this for me, whether or not Wednesday had met up with Tyr before or after his followers started dying. Because if he met up with Tyr beforehand, that explains everything, that them meeting up, him asking for help, and it's just kind of like, oh, you're still the same Odin, you haven't changed. Damn it, screw it, I'm going to take you down. Because he probably feels like Odin's in a vulnerable state. He doesn't have a lot of people. He has some people in his corner, but he's not as well guarded as before, maybe, and he's not as on top of his game. So Tyr pretty much figured he could take him. I wonder if Shadow hadn't interfered, because it's like, I love when they be like, oh no, we'll settle this the old way, and it turns into a full-blown battle between the two. I think probably Wednesday has missed a step or two. It's probably also because he's not using Gungnir. If he was using Gungnir, it'd probably be a different story. But since he's just using a sword, like, it's probably that probably played a role in him. But the moment, like, Shadow also had that dream vision where he saw someone in the gold armor, I was like, so that's his dad. And I'm like, who are all these other people? Are those people supposed to be those following him into war, or is that supposed to represent like all the people that will die? I think it's supposed to be the followers, but part of me was also thinking like, could that potentially be all the people that die because of what Wednesday does? I don't know. All the people that end up dying because of Wednesday, but we do see him kind of extending his hand out to Shadow, so I don't know. But luckily, because Shadow interfered, it gave his dad the upper hand, and it's like, yep, hard cut to him burning Tyr's body and laughing like an asshole. Because even Shadow admits, it's like, yeah, my dad's kind of an asshole, so he didn't really need to know too much about, like, yeah, considering all the stuff that my dad's done, I'm not too surprised that you want to kill him. A lot of people want him dead. Hell, my ex-wife told me she wants him dead, and she's going to do everything she can to kill him, so that's no surprise there. Like, another person wanting him dead? Sure. But it also shows that Shadow isn't willing to let anyone kill him. He wasn't going to help Laura or even wish Laura luck in accomplishing that. So that means eventually it's going to turn him... Because sadly, we've seen that firsthand. Like, even though it was an accident, he ended up doing the same thing when it came to Sweeney. So sadly, him and Laura might be on a collision course. That might be a repeat of history, like 3 times in a row now. Because, like I said, did it first with Sweeney. Now he's doing it with... Now he did it with Tyr. He might do it with Laura too. It'll be interesting to see how that ultimately ends up kind of playing out in that front. But it's like, hey, I'm so proud of you. You know, I'm so proud of the man you've become. Your obligations to me are done. So make sure you dispose of that car. And he bounces. So, and Shadow's like, fuck you. He looks up to the moon and is like, fuck you too. So I don't know how I'm supposed, like, interpreting that. Like, I don't know whether that's kind of a thing of, like, after everything, now you let me go. Like, now I get to have, like, the normal life or whatever that you were saying I could have. Like, now I get to, after I helped you murder someone. Like, of course, now. Or is it just going to be a thing of, oh, yeah, I left you here in this random location. I'm not going to teleport you to where you need to be or take you back to Lakeside. Like, maybe it's just kind of like, again, my life goes through hell because of you. Like, I feel like there's different interpretations of that F you. Even saying to the moon, just because it's like, regardless of what he does, he's always going to, always be dragged into his dad's BS, even though he's like, oh, your obligation to me is done. We'll see. I think it's also kind of a thing of like, screw you, Wednesday. It's never going to be done. As your son, I'm always going to be dragged into your BS. I'm always going to have this connection to you. So that's how I was reading it. I'm probably reading it entirely wrong, but still. Which is interesting because someone had suggested like the person from his visions was the other half, which it seems like that person is Wednesday. So it begs the question: is that what that's supposed to signify, or is that foreshadowing something else? Foreshadowing. I don't know. I'm curious to see where things kind of go on that front. Another side of this episode, we have everything with the technical boy, as he's still glitching in this world. It's like, no, don't worry, we'll fix you right up, because it's like, bring me Bilquist and she'll fix me. She's the one that messed me up in the first place. And it's like, oh, here's the head grabber. He's like, no. And she's like, oh no, this. He's like, I'm literally the one being in the multiverse that isn't going to fall for this techno-babble horse shit that you're trying to spill to me. Like, the only person that won't fall for that is me, because I know you're full of crap. And he gets head grabbed again. Kind of locked up in a straitjacket. And I love that scene so much, just because, obviously, like, Bilquist shows up, but it's not Bilquist. It's his subconscious manifesting itself as Bilquist. I guess like another middle finger to him, because literally the first thing she does when she shows up is giving them flips him the double bird. So I think that's interesting. I think that probably had to be so fun for E-Tide. I feel like I always say her name wrong. She's the actress who plays Bilquist. That had to be fun because obviously she has to like mimic the technical boy a little bit with just the way she talks, and just also like, it's so interesting hearing her talk that way too, being like, oh shit for brains. Better be careful, pussy boy, before I rip them off, and then you won't have to worry about scratching them. And he was like, oh, you're going to need more than 2 hands and a chainsaw to do that. I was like, wow. But it's like also explaining like those glitches. It's like, I didn't do anything to you. I woke you up. You're the one that's choosing to stay awake. It's like, because he wants to say he has no emotions, but those emotions are there. Like, I guess what she did initially was made him feel. And that moment, him running, I guess it was supposed to be like a physical manifestation of his fear. And so it's like all these glitches is you fighting back against the emotions you're feeling. It's like feel them and then let them go. You want to say that you're not feeling any emotions, but you are. Whether it's angry, sad, glad, whatever it is, feel it, then let it go. And he's like, what are you doing? What are you feeling right now? Angry. I want world to get their foot off my neck. And it's like, all right, then get out of here. And it's like, but what I thought was interesting is that little glitch where it's like the subconscious turns into Bill Quist, like specifically, and says a line of, isn't my beauty or something like that enough? It was like, obviously, like she even like did her voice like Bill Quist again. And I was like, oh, that was interesting. So it's like, all right, so your subconscious is going to have to do everything. So we see on the outside, he gets himself out of the head grabber. Because it's also like, if you want to kind of fix things, you got to find Artifact 1, which we know is in that building. Because obviously it's like, World isn't trying to fix you. They're trying to like keep you on ice. Because it's like, well, can't have you causing more issues, glitching. So stay here where we know you are. It's actually kind of sad because like when we got the outside view, he's just laying on the table like, and his body's jerking from just everything happening inside. So I just thought that was so interesting. Like, oh, you just literally didn't even bother putting him somewhere else. She just left him on a conference table and just bounced. So where that goes, we'll have to wait and see. What will happen when the technical boy gets his hands on that Artifact 1, like what that will unlock and what that would do. I don't know. Might even see a situation where he switched sides. Maybe, maybe not. It might not even be a thing of, oh, I'm joining the old gods. It's a thing of, I'm in this for myself. As long as maybe it's also just so like, I want to be in a position where world has no more control over me, where I can just decide my own fate and destiny. We'll see. So there's that side of thing. But what I also thought was kind of interesting is another side of this. It ties into the opening with the whole situation of the Grand Peacock Motel, which I think is so interesting because let's not forget, like Shadow saw that earlier in the season. Like he saw the peacock, which I'm like, is it eventually going to lead him there? Maybe. But that was an interesting opening on the whole situation with Tony. I guess that rabbit god, that was actually a really sad story of like, a young man fell in love with an inspector. That inspector had that young man beaten to death for his feelings. But that young man haunted the inspector's dream until the inspector built a temple worshiping that person, that young man, as a god of homosexual love in China. And I was like, dude, I wonder if I have to look into that. Once again, there's like a lot of myth. Obviously, the show pulls from a lot of mythology that I'm not well versed in. So I was like, oh, snap. That's a sad and depressing story. But it's like, oh, yeah, like I haven't been able to find a temple since I came to, America 100 years ago. And Tony's like, oh, do you need a doctor? It's like, oh, you think I'm great. But it's like, no. It's like, I am a rabbit god. And it's like, hey, which I guess, different gods are represented by different animals. So I just thought that was interesting. Because I'm trying to think, are rabbits part of the Chinese zodiac? They have to be, right? Maybe not. I think they are. Maybe there's probably a god representing everything on the Chinese zodiac. Maybe? I don't know. Once again, I'm not well versed in, like I said, a lot of mythologies. But I like that. It's like I'm blessing this place to kind of be a safe haven. Because you took care of me, I'm blessing you for a long life of happiness. And I'm blessing this place to be a safe place for me and mine, yous and yours, and all kindred spirits. And honestly, that scene of like, she's like, oh, you sure you don't need a doctor? It's like, oh, you're an amazing storyteller. But then like he opens his mouth and the butterflies. Like, from a cinematography standpoint, I was like, that looks fucking beautiful. Like the butterflies and everything and them all coming together to form a peak. I was like, that was just like the bright coloring of it and everything was so beautiful. I was like, oh, and it formed the peacock sign. So that's why I'm like, Also, interesting enough, it seems like he gave, when he meant it when he's like a long life, because Tony's still alive and she looks exactly the same. So it's like, oh, holy crap. So, I think that's supposed to be what, which is interesting too, because like Tony has said like, oh, maybe it was kind of luck. Well, I guess he is a rabbit god, and rabbit, whole thing about like rabbit feet supposed to be lucky. So it's like, oh yeah, I guess you got lucky, because I was planning on shutting this place down, but I was like, no customers, no money. So it's like, but I decided to keep it open a couple more weeks. It's like, interesting how that does all ultimately work out. But Laura and Salim end up there. And I love that it's like as she walks in, it's like, oh, you're supposed to be looking for Liam Doyle. And it's like, oh, hi, Laura Moon. It's like, another leprechaun. She's like, fuck, I think she's like, I hate my life. And eventually meets up with Liam, played by, I think his name is Ian. It's spelled a little differently, but I think that's how you pronounce. Obviously, I've never seen it. I've watched bits of it, but not a lot. I know he was in Game of Thrones. The thing I best know him for is, and it's been a while. It's Simon, right, from Misfits. It's the thing I best know him from. I was like, I didn't know you were going to be in this. That's so cool. What's interesting to find out was that he was the one that was originally hired to kill Laura. That's why he was like, I've seen your obituary. She's like, why are you reading my obituary? It's like, I was actually the one hired to kill you. No, Wednesday hired Sweeney to kill me. It's like, yeah, after I turned him down. Because he's like, yeah, I'm a scumbag, but when the Lord of all scumbag comes to hire you, you're kind of like, whoa. This might be going a little too far. So I think that actually speaks volumes. He decided not to take the job, but Sweeney did. To be fair, Sweeney kind of lost a lot of who he was. You know, I mean, who he was as a sun god was taken from him years ago when people came to Ireland and just made fairy folk, people like him, into fairies and leprechauns. Like the image of what a leprechaun now is, like he took away his identity as a sun god and turned him and his folk into fairy folk, you know, of what they kind of get typically depicted as. So I thought that was interesting to find that out. So it's like, okay. And so what was also interesting too was like he did bring up there are rules for this whole situation about like a leprechaun can't enter another leprechaun's horde because it's like there's issues on that front, just because it's like, now we never, it's like, it's basically like a rule, but it's like we never found out what the ramifications would be for that. I think he says specifically it's even worse if you're going for a weapon. So that was interesting. Laura even giving him this BS story, which I'm like, oh, you were kind of taking some steps forwards, and now you're kind of being a swindler again, because she's lying and being like, yeah, Sweeney kind of gave me his coin, obviously leaving out all the crazy details about how you got his coin in the first place, but making it seem like, oh no, he gave me his coin. And yeah, that's, you know, saying that, oh, like Wednesday killed him, even though it was Wednesday to a certain extent, but it was really your ex-husband who did it. But it's like, all right, you're just going to use it to defend yourself. He's still reluctant at first, because, you know, but it's like, all right, if you give me the coin, it'll give me the power I need, because his coin got destroyed for turning down Wednesday, so he lost his powers, so, and ended up waking up and finding himself here, so. But Laura doesn't want to hand over the coin, and that's an interesting angle about Laura and Salim's story this episode, is about letting go, because Laura doesn't want to hand over the coin. He's like, yeah, it is fair. It's like, but she's like, no, like, I'm not going to do that. It's like, okay, I get it, because you don't trust him, right? But he's like, isn't that ironic? You don't trust the person who chose not to kill you, but you fell in love with the person who did choose to kill you. She's like, I didn't fall in love with Sweeney, but I thought that was an interesting thing, because there's also this thing about, you know, Salim telling her that maybe it's time for her to let go, because if she gives up Sweeney's coin, and why she's carrying around the coin in the ashes, because if she gives him up, it means acknowledging that he's dead and gone. Which she's like, yeah, coming from the guy that's still wearing the sweater of the guy he's chasing after. And it's like, yeah, like he's still, which I didn't remember that. I was like, I completely forgot, right, that's the Jinn sweater. I didn't even think about that. I completely forgot that's the sweater that Jinn was wearing the first time they met. But it's like, yeah, both of them having to learn to let go. They're both keeping these reminders of people. It's like, yeah, the people, you know, my Jinn, your Sweeney, they're gone and they're not coming back. And that's the thing about both of them having a hard time moving forward. Especially in Salim's case, I thought it was interesting because, you know, Kai constantly keeps inviting him to the party, but like Salim's a little hesitant. And I thought what's interesting when he was talking to Tony, it's like, for him, he felt like, oh, I'd already kind of worked past my issues. I kind of accept, you know, I'm gay, and he accepts that aspect about himself. But I think for him, it's a situation where he had found love, and then it like kind of disappeared from his life. Like the person he had opened up to and fell in love with, it's kind of gone now. The love he was kind of fighting for, it's kind of gone. So it makes him kind of feel like maybe God was saying my love was wrong in the first place. But it's like, you kind of need to just, or maybe this is kind of what God has planned for you to prove that your love is right, that you being here at this party, just kind of you are going to be safe here, but just kind of let go and just kind of do what feels right for you, and he walks Tony in, oh, can I, escort you in? And it's obviously a popping party. Let's just leave it at that. And obviously him and Kai get together. And I thought it was interesting. Like, obviously, whereas the Jin kind of led everything last time, but like Salim is like, this time with Kai, he's like, may I? And he kind of, so I think that's kind of a neat element of his story kind of coming full circle in that regard. But when it's all said and done, he does kind of feel good. I think he is able to let go, because even later on, you have Laura being like, where's your sweater? And he's like, I don't know, I must have lost it. And I think for her, it's like, that was proof of seeing how much he was ready to move on. He was already moving on and everything. So it's like, it's time for me to. So prior to that, she had already given him the coin, and it's like, all right, it's supposed to take a couple seconds for you to come out of the horde. If you don't, I'm gonna be your worst nightmare. And he's like, all right, be back. And he pops off, didn't come back. So she's like, I got screwed. But she talks about, you're right. She's like, no, it's not your fault, Salim. It's my fault, because I should have never listened to you because you're super naive. He's like, She's like, no, that's a good thing. You see the best in people, even when they're trying to rip out your heart. Obviously, she can be very pessimistic as well, but she wants to, it's like, okay, when this is all said and done, like, I can't get the spear, I can't kill Wednesday, so you need to stay here, because obviously this place is a safe haven. But Salim's like, no, I'm gonna go with you. And she's like, what? No, like, being with me is the worst possible thing. I want to go warn Shadow about what's happening, but I'm going to try and kill Wednesday anyway. But if I fail, the new gods are coming after you. But for him, it's like, I'm not going to run. I'm not going to run anymore. I'm not going to run even from the new gods. Even if I don't go with you, then I'll travel somewhere else. Yes, our paths might be, even if our paths diverge here, eventually we will meet up again somewhere along the way. And it's like, she's like, I want you to stay here and be safe. And he's like, why, Laura? Why do you care? She's like, because I care about you, Salim. And it's like, and he's like, I love you too, Laura Moon. I'm like, oh, because she never wants to admit, because it's like, Salim's her friend, because I doubt, like, Laura has many people, especially because in her mind, it's like, I've screwed up everything, every relationship I've ever had, any friends show. I think for her, it's like, and she ends up talking about that later on, over Sweeney. It's like that, like, for her, she felt like, she's like, even though they told me in purgatory, I'm not responsible for everything kind of being messed up in my own life. She's like, it still feels that way. And that's why she enjoyed being around Sweeney, because it seemed like I fuck up everything in my life, you fucked up everything in your life. So it kind of made, her feel like she found a bit of a kindred spirit in that regard. So it's just kind of like a, even at the end being like, goodbye, fuck you. But it was like, I think Sweeney would have it no other way, like that being his send-off from Laura. But obviously showing that obviously Sweeney did mean a lot to you. That time you guys spent together meant a lot, I mean, I think that's the irony behind it. Like, you were looking for your light and shadow the entire time. And, once again, you never realize what you got until it's gone, right? So, which is ironic, because she thought that about Shadow when it's kind of been right there in front of her the entire time with Sweeney, but then Sweeney's gone now, so I think that's kind of interesting. But for Liam to show up and be like, whoa, here's your spear. He's like, damn it, like, what kind of horde is that? That bastard had this thing, and it was like, that thing I thought was going to kill me. It's like, here's your spear. And it's like, huh. But he's like, that's no spear for protection. That's Odin's Gungnir spear. And it's like, what are you going to do with that? I'm going to kill Wednesday. I was kind of hoping he would go with her. We'll see whether their paths will cross again. But at the end, we also see Salim kind of praying, which obviously he hasn't in a long time. Like, I think, obviously he's taken steps forward. He's moving forward. That I think he's happy about, it's like he's finally found and kind of fully accepted himself, that he's kind of moving forward, kind of accepting who he is. And it's like, because he had talked about that like an episode or two ago about he didn't know who to pray to and what for, but it looks like he kind of found his way again. So I think it's nice to see that direction Salim's story's going. And I'm curious, are he and Laura going in different direction, or is Laura going to come back and be like, all right, I got a spear now. You want to come along with me? Fine. I mean, I guess I want you to come along with me too. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see. It's definitely going to be interesting. We're only got a couple episodes left. We've got, once again, I believe it's 11 episodes this season, so we've only got like 3 episodes left. So I'm so curious to see, where the next episode is going to take us with all of this. I left it off, but I forgot that to bring up the fact that we had Shadow, rather than going right back to Lakeside, he ends up going to Florida because he wants to check on Marguerite's son, Sandy, which obviously, they haven't been in contact with, so I think he's looking into that. He even had he looked at that picture of Florida and it started moving. Kind of his power is kind of pointing him in the right direction of where he needs to be or where he should go. So it's going to be interesting to see what he ends up discovering on that front, like why they haven't been able to get in contact with Sandy the past 2 years. So, like I said, we'll have to wait and see where the next episode takes us. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.